Afternoon, guys.
We know just in a few minutes, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, he is set to announce plans for the Department of Justice to investigate the policing practices in Minneapolis, of course, coming the day after the verdict in the Chauvin trial. So we're going to take you there live when it happens. So we're kind of at the ready at the moment, but that's coming up in just a few minutes.
Yeah, and that will be really interesting to see what he has to say and what that means going forward. We have yet to hear from the police department about this or the city of Minneapolis. No comment as of right now. But again, we'll take that to you live when it happens. Right now, though, we want to just do a little bit of a recap and a look ahead. We know that people here in Minneapolis, in the state of Minnesota, the country, the world really continue to react this morning to that verdict of guilt, the guilty verdict on all three counts that came in yesterday against the former officer. In fact, we have a new photo to show you this morning. This is the new booking photo of Derek Chauvin. He is now in prison this morning. He's at the Oak Park Heights Correctional Facility. That is the state's maximum security prison. That was new just in the last hour. That is where he will be until sentencing set for June. Second-degree unintentional murder carries a sentence of up to 40 years in prison. The third-degree murder is up to 25 years, and the second-degree manslaughter is 10 years. Again, found guilty on all three counts. Sentencing guidelines recommend 12.5 years for each murder charge and about 4 years for manslaughter. Ultimately, it will be up to Judge Peter Cahill for the length of his prison time. Now, the other officers, that's the other big question. What happens with those three officers who were there, too, when George Floyd was killed? They are charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter. We know they will be tried together, all three, this summer. That's set for August. What happened yesterday? How does that determine what happens in August? Yet to be seen. Earlier this morning, I spoke with the mayor of Minneapolis, Mayor Jacob Frey, about what happens now, where we go from here, and specifically what this means for Minneapolis residents.
Well, last night, as you know, was very peaceful, and I want to really credit those that were out and peacefully protesting. And so I think in the very near future, we'll be able to get back to a sense of normal, at least with respect to lifting some of the security measures that we presently have in place. Those safety and security measures are necessary. They have been necessary to prevent some of the chaos and destruction that we saw last summer. But I think people also want to get back to their daily lives.
What do you say to folks? And again, the big question, too, also when it talks to, security measures. We've seen the National Guard here. We've seen the State Patrol. We've seen businesses boarded up. I just walked the streets just about 10 minutes ago. Obviously, there's still fencing around nearly every single building here in downtown. Restaurants are boarded up. You can get in just with a little door. But a big question there, when will that ease? We don't totally know at this point. Alex Kendall, will send it back to you there in the studio right now.
Okay, we've been awaiting word, of course. We know we're just a few moments away. The U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland is going to be speaking this morning in Washington. He's expected to announce an investigation into practices at the Minneapolis Police Department. And we know that came a day, of course, after Officer Chauvin was found guilty on all three counts. It's already investigating whether the officers involved violated Floyd's civil rights. And it announced Wednesday they're looking into the pattern of practice of policing here at the Minneapolis Police Department. The official there's no direct knowledge at this point, but we are going to listen in now to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland.
Good morning. Like so many of you, I have closely watched the events in Minnesota. Although the state's prosecution was successful, I know that nothing can fill the void that the loved ones of George Floyd have felt since his death. My heart goes out to them and to all those who have experienced similar loss. I know such wounds have deep roots, and that too many communities have experienced those wounds firsthand. Yesterday's verdict in the state criminal trial does not address potentially systemic policing issues in Minneapolis. Today, I am announcing that the Justice Department has opened a civil investigation to determine whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. This effort will be staffed by experienced attorneys and other personnel from the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota. The new civil investigation is separate from and independent of the federal criminal investigation into the death of George Floyd that the Justice Department has previously announced. Congress gave the department the authority to conduct civil pattern or practice investigations, which look beyond individual incidents to assess systemic failures. Those investigations allow the department to determine whether a police department has a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing. The investigation I am announcing today will assess whether the Minneapolis Police Department engages in a pattern or practice of using excessive force, including during protests. The investigation will also assess whether the MPD engages in discriminatory conduct and whether its treatment of those with behavioral health disabilities is unlawful. It will include a comprehensive review of the Minneapolis Police Department's policies, training, supervision, and use of force investigations. It will assess the effectiveness of the MPD's current systems of accountability and whether other mechanisms are needed to ensure constitutional and lawful policing. Broad participation in this investigation from the community and from law enforcement will be vital to its success. The Justice Department has already begun to reach out to community groups and members of the public to learn about their experiences with the MPD. We also seek to hear from the department's officers about the training and support they receive because their perspective is essential. All these voices will help provide investigators the information they need to conduct a comprehensive assessment. All these voices will be critical to the reform efforts that will follow if the investigation determines the existence of constitutional or statutory violations. If the Justice Department concludes that there is reasonable cause to believe there is a pattern or practice of unconstitutional or unlawful policing, we will issue a public report of our conclusions. The Justice Department also has the authority to bring a civil lawsuit asking a federal court to provide injunctive relief that orders the MPD to change its policies and practices to avoid further violations. Usually, when the Justice Department finds unlawful practices or patterns of practices, the local police department enters into a settlement agreement or a consent decree to ensure that prompt and effective action is taken to align policing practices with the law. Most of our nation's law enforcement officers do their difficult jobs honorably and lawfully. I strongly believe that good officers do not want to work in systems that allow bad practices. Good officers welcome accountability because accountability is an essential part of building trust with the community, and public safety requires public trust. I have been involved in the legal system in one way or another for most of my adult life. I know that justice is sometimes slow, sometimes elusive, and sometimes never comes. The Department of Justice will be unwavering in its pursuit of equal justice under law. The challenges we face are deeply woven into our history. They did not arise today or last year. Building trust between community and law enforcement will take time and effort by all of us. But we undertake this task with determination and urgency, knowing that change cannot wait. Thank you.
Well, you just heard there from U.S. Attorney U.S. Attorney Merrick Garland talking, of course, about the, he said his heart goes out to the families of George Floyd, and he was talking about, of course, the verdict and the civil investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. This is, he's going to be looking into the unlawful policing practices And this is going to be a sweeping investigation, including looking at some excessive force in some protests. Also, he's going to be getting down to the accountability. He said good officers welcome accountability, so he's looking forward to that. He acknowledged that sometimes justice is slow, and he plans to pursue unwavering pursuit of equal justice. So there we heard from U.S. Attorney Merrick Garland and the civil investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department. Okay, it is 9:10 right now. We're going to go to Alex Laynard, who is at 38th in Chicago, where we know the family of George Floyd and so many people gathered yesterday after hearing the verdict. People were just crying. It was an emotional experience. And today we see that you have some people showing up. And what are you finding? What are people saying to you this morning, Alex?
Yeah, there's certainly just still a kind of excitement in the air, but sort of a peace in the air here at 38th in Chicago. This intersection certainly transforming, people coming out to pay their respects this morning. Lots of media out here as well. This intersection, as we know, has really transformed from just a place that people used to pass through to now a stopping ground and a destination for a lot of people. And as you mentioned, Alex, yesterday, hundreds and hundreds of people came out here to huddle together and gather together in anticipation of what that verdict might be, gathering around cell phones and anything they could to hear what Judge Cahill was going to say. And when they did hear that, certainly a lot of excitement, lots of cheers and tears, and overall euphoria here. A much anticipated verdict, guilty on all three accounts. And out here this morning, we talked to some folks who say that this is just the beginning, that change certainly started yesterday, but that change needs to continue. And while we did see justice for George Floyd, we still await the trial of those other three officers, but that we are still, waiting on more justice to be served. And this change, again, kind of needs to start at the beginning, is what we're hearing from folks here.
The things we learned yesterday, the power of the video, the hurt of a real person, real pain. So I'm sure, we will all get to, at some point, have to look inside and start treating each other with love and kindness and authority. And we have to respect authority.
And still lots of people coming out here this morning to pay their tributes and to kind of gather together after what happened yesterday here at 38th in Chicago. Alex?
Okay, all right. Alex Laynard joining us this morning from 38th in Chicago, where people, as we know, are gathering after yesterday's verdict and remembering George Floyd. We're going to take a quick break. The Fox 9 Morning Buzz. We'll be right back.